Welcome to Dreamy Tales, a place where gentle, relaxing stories will guide you into a deep sleep. On this channel, we'll be sharing soothing stories to help you unwind and forget the worries of the day. If you enjoy these peaceful moments, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and tap the notification bell so you won't miss any of our bedtime tales. Let's create a space of relaxation together each night. Now, before we dive into tonight's story, let's take a few moments to relax your body and mind. Find a comfortable spot to sit or lie down. Gently close your eyes and take a deep breath. Inhale slowly, feeling the fresh air filling your lungs, and slowly exhale, letting the tension in your body gradually melt away. Repeat this 3 more times. With each breath, feel yourself becoming more relaxed and ready to enter the magical world of stories. Now, loosen your shoulders, gently massage your face, and release any remaining tension. Pay attention to any areas in your body that still feel tight, maybe in your neck, back, or legs, and gently let them relax. Next, we'll do a short guided visualization. Imagine yourself in a beautiful garden under the night sky, with the soft moonlight shining down. You can hear the rustling of leaves in the breeze, the sound of water flowing gently in the distance. Feel the cool breeze brushing against your face. Now that your body and mind are relaxed, let's step into tonight's story. But before we begin, remind yourself that you deserve these moments of relaxation, and let go of all worries as you listen to each word. And now, as you are fully relaxed, let's begin our journey into tonight's tale. Allow my words to guide you into a world of dreams and serenity. Relax and listen slowly. Ah, hello there, my friend. Come in, find a cozy spot, curl up. Yes, just like that. Make yourself comfortable. Let the day gently melt away like a tiny snowflake on a warm window pane. We're going to take a little journey tonight, a very gentle journey to a place quite unlike any other you might imagine. Imagine, for just a moment, a world made entirely of patches. Not just little squares sewn onto a quilt. Oh no, an entire planet, stitched together from pieces of everywhere and everything. There are patches of whispering velvet forests, where the trees have leaves as soft as a moth's wing. There are patches of rivers that flow with shimmering silk, reflecting the moon like 1,000 tiny mirrors. There are mountains made of loosely knitted cloud wool, so soft you could sleep right on their slopes. Fields of bright, cheerful calico, dotted with flowers that hum gentle tunes. And even deserts, not of sand, but of tiny, sparkling glass beads that tinkle like wind chimes when the gentle breeze whispers over them. This is the Patchwork Planet, a place where colors tell stories and textures sing songs. And on this wonderful, slightly unusual planet lived our friend. Her name was Alara Threadwind. Alara wasn't like the bustling bobbin bees, always buzzing about collecting lint. She wasn't like the mighty fabric falcons, soaring on wings of woven light. No, Alara was a keeper of the patches. Specifically, she was a listener. Alara had a special gift. She could hear the stories of the stitches, every single stitch on the Patchwork Planet, from the tiniest cross-stitch holding a pebble to the enormous, sturdy seams holding whole continents together, had a story. A story of where it came from, who put it there, the light it had seen, the rain it had felt. Alara would spend her days gently tracing these stitches with her fingertip, listening to the quiet hum of contentment from a well-loved patch, listening to the faint whisper of an old memory woven into the threads. She lived in a small, cozy cottage on the edge of a gingham meadow, a cottage made of sturdy tweed walls and a roof thatched with soft, faded chenille. Inside, it was filled with the quiet scent of dried lavender and the soft glow of a single, steady lamp. Alara herself was small and had hands that moved with deliberate, gentle slowness. Her eyes were the color of warm, brown buttons, and they held a lot of kindness. Her hair was braided like a thick, soft rope, trailing down her back. She wore clothes made from pieces of the planet, a skirt of faded denim from a long-lost ocean patch, a blouse of linen as fine as butterfly wings, and a shawl knitted from the softest cloud wool. Alara was, by nature, a little anxious. Not a big, noisy anxiety, no. It was a quiet, fluttering feeling, like a trapped moth behind her ribs. She worried about the stitches. What if they came undone? What if a patch felt lonely and faded away? What if the colors lost their songs? Her biggest worry, though, was about the great central patch. This wasn't just a patch. It was the heart of the planet. A patch so enormous, so vibrant, that it pulsed with a soft, warm light. It was said that this patch was the very first one, the one that everything else was stitched onto. It was made of a material no one quite understood. It felt like sunshine and smelled like happy memories. But lately, for weeks now, Alara had been listening, and the hum from the great central patch was fading. Just a little at first. A subtle change in the usual strong, steady pulse. Like a beautiful piece of music being played, and one instrument is slowly, almost imperceptibly, getting quieter. It was a gentle conflict, yes, but a deeply worrying one for Alara. Because if the heart of the planet faded, what would happen to everything else? One morning, the light from the great central patch seemed dimmer. Not dark, never dark, but muted. The colors, usually so bright and clear, looked a little washed out. The air around it, usually buzzing with a soft energy, felt still. Alara put on her sturdiest but still gentle traveling boots made from felted moss. She packed a small bag with a needle carved from polished bone, a spool of the finest listening thread she had spun herself, and a few dried berry cakes. With a deep, slow breath, she set off. Her journey began by crossing the gingham meadow. The air was sweet with the scent of humming flowers. The ground felt soft and springy under her feet. She saw bobbin bees industriously collecting fluffy white lint from the flower centers, their little legs dusted with softness. "Good morning, Alara," buzzed a particularly cheerful bee, its tiny wings a blur. "Good morning, little friend," Alara replied, her voice soft and warm. Heading towards the center, the bee asked. Alara nodded, a little frown creasing her brow. "The great patch. It feels a little quiet," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The bee paused its lint gathering, its antennae drooping slightly. "Yes," it buzzed softly. "We've noticed. The lint from the flowers near there, it doesn't seem to hold its color quite as well." This confirmed Alara's worries. Even the lint was noticing. She walked on, the gingham squares passing beneath her feet, alternating between cheerful yellow and sky blue. The edges of the meadow were stitched onto a patch of deep, purple velvet forest. As she stepped onto the velvet, the sounds of the meadow faded, replaced by a profound, soft silence. The trees here were tall and slender, their trunks like rolled velvet tubes. Their leaves were large, floppy shapes, the color of plums and deep, sleepy indigo. Elara reached out a hand, gently touching a leaf. It was unbelievably soft, like stroking a contented cat. The air here was cool and smelled of old stories and quiet dreams. Creatures lived here too. Little velvet moths with wings patterned like antique carpets fluttered silently between the trees. And the shush owls, who didn't hoot but made a soft, shushing sound that seemed to encourage quiet and calm. Elara needed to pass through the velvet forest to get closer to the great central patch. The path wasn't marked, but she followed the feeling of the softest parts, which always seemed to lead towards the heart of the planet. Walking through velvet is different. Every step is muffled. It feels like walking through a dream. The light is filtered, dim and peaceful. She kept her steps slow, listening to the almost silence, listening for the subtle changes in the texture underfoot, which told her she was on the right path. Hours passed in the velvet forest, feeling like mere moments. Elara felt her own fluttery anxiety begin to calm down in the deep quiet. The velvet seemed to absorb her worries, leaving her feeling lighter, more at ease. She saw a shush owl perched on a velvet branch, its large, knowing eyes blinking slowly. It made its soft shush sound. Elara smiled, a genuine, soft smile. "Yes," she whispered back. "Quiet is good sometimes. Thank you." Emerging from the velvet forest, she came to the edge of a vast river. But this wasn't a river of water. This was the river of silk, the most incredible, shimmering river you could ever imagine. It flowed with liquid silk in every color: molten gold, cool silver, shimmering rose, deep sapphire. The colors swirled and mixed, never quite blending, creating patterns that changed with every ripple. The air here was light and felt luxurious. The scent was like clean sheets dried in the sun, mixed with something subtly sweet. Crossing the river of silk wasn't easy. There were no bridges, only a few large, flat pearl buttons that floated gently on the surface. Elara had to hop carefully from one pearl button to another. Each button was cool and smooth under her boots. As she stepped onto the first one, it gave a tiny musical chime. Each button had its own note, creating a soft, random melody as she crossed. "Oh, how lovely," she murmured to herself, taking her time, enjoying the gentle music of the buttons. The silk flowed beneath her, its surface catching the light and sending dazzling reflections dancing on the underside of the pearl buttons. Little sequin fish darted through the silken currents, their scales flashing like tiny disco balls. They didn't swim, they sort of glided and twirled through the thick, slow-moving silk. Elara watched them for a moment, her anxiety forgotten in the face of such quiet beauty. Crossing the Silk River took a long time. Each step had to be measured, deliberate. It required patience. But Elara had patience in abundance. It was one of her quiet strengths. Finally, she reached the other side, stepping onto a patch of what felt like sturdy canvas. It was a land of rolling hills, the color of faded blueprints. This was where the thread spiders lived. Not scary spiders, oh no. These spiders were the size of small dogs, but their bodies were like fluffy cotton balls, and they had 8 long, graceful legs like knitting needles. And the thread they spun wasn't ordinary thread. It was thread made of light. Fine, shimmering strands that they spun between the canvas hills, creating a beautiful, glowing web that stretched across the landscape. The air here hummed with soft energy. The scent was clean, like fresh air after a sun shower. Alara loved the thread spiders. They were quiet, focused creatures, always creating. Their webs weren't for catching things, but for catching the light and for communicating. The patterns in the webs told stories, passed messages. Alara saw a large thread spider, its cottony body glowing faintly, sitting patiently on a canvas hill. It was spinning a fresh strand of golden light thread. As it finished, the thread pulsed with a soft, warm glow. Alara approached gently. "Good day, friend," she said softly. The thread spider turned its many gentle eyes towards her. It didn't speak with words, but it pulsed with light in a specific rhythm. Alara had learned to read the light language of the spiders. "You journey towards the heart," the light pulsed, slow and steady. "I do," Alara replied. "The great central patch. It feels unwell." The thread spider pulsed again, a long melancholic note of light. "We feel it too. The light threads we spin nearby. They do not hold their glow as well as they used to. It is concerning." The final pulse was like a sigh made of fading light. "That is why I must go," Alara said, "to listen, to understand." The thread spider pulsed one more time, a pattern that meant go safely. "May your journey be filled with gentle light." It then gently offered her a tiny, glowing bead of condensed light thread. "For your path," the pulse said. "Oh, thank you," Alara said, taking the bead. It felt warm and comforting in her hand. She carefully placed it in her bag. She continued her journey across the canvas hills, walking between the luminous threads. The ground was firm here, but felt worn and smooth, like a favorite old book cover. She could hear the soft, continuous hum of the spider's work, a sound that was deeply soothing. After the hills, she reached a patch unlike any other she had seen up close. This was the patch of Button Mountains. These mountains weren't rocky peaks, but enormous stacked buttons. Buttons of every size, shape, and material imaginable. Giant wooden buttons, cool and smooth. Shiny plastic buttons reflecting the sky like mirrors. Rough, textured bone buttons. Flat, delicate mother-of-pearl buttons, showing faint rainbows in their depths. And buttons with different numbers of holes. 2 holes, 4 holes, even clusters of tiny holes. Climbing the Button Mountains was a unique challenge. Alara had to find the button holes that were large enough to step through, using them as footholds. It was like climbing a vertical quilt. Each step required careful placement. She had to test the stability of each button, making sure it was firmly attached by its stitches. Some of the buttons had little button bugs living in their holes. These were small, iridescent beetles that collected dust and polished the inside of the holes until they shimmered. They were quite friendly, offering Alara little waves with their tiny legs as she carefully navigated their homes. The air up high in the Button Mountains was crisp and clear. The scent was a mix of polished wood and faint, sweet dust. From the higher buttons, Alara could see the landscape spread out below. The gingham meadow, the dark swath of the velvet forest, the shimmering ribbon of the Silk River, the glowing web of the canvas hills. And in the distance she could see it, the great central patch. From here, it looked vast, circular, like a giant muted sun laying on the horizon. She could see that its colors were indeed less vibrant than she remembered. A pang of worry, that familiar fluttery moth, stirred in her chest. She took a slow, deep breath, just as the shush owl in the velvet forest had seemed to suggest. Breathe in calm. Breathe out worry. It helped a little. Climbing the Button Mountains was a slow process. Each button required attention, care. It taught her patience on a physical level. She felt the different textures under her hands, the warmth of wood, the coolness of plastic, the slight grit of bone. She saw how the light played on the different surfaces, creating mini rainbows on the mother of pearl, sharp glints on the plastic. Near the summit of the highest Button Mountain, she met an old needlebird. Needlebirds were magnificent creatures, with long, thin beaks like sewing needles and feathers the color of every thread imaginable. They were said to be the guardians of the strongest stitches. This old needlebird was perched on a giant wooden button, its feathers the soft, faded colors of an ancient tapestry. It didn't sing, but made a soft, rhythmic tapping sound with its beak against the wood. Tap, 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 tap. Elara approached gently. "Good day," she said, her voice quiet in the high air. The needlebird tilted its head, its eyes bright and intelligent. It tapped again. Tap, 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 tap. Elara listened carefully. "You are tapping the rhythm of the heart," she murmured, recognizing the beat. The bird tapped a slow, steady rhythm, but then it missed a beat. Tap, 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 pause. Tap, 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 tap. "Yes," Elara said, her heart sinking a little. "I hear it. It is irregular. It is fading." The needlebird nodded its sharp beak. It tapped a new pattern. Tap, tap. Pause. Tap, 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 tap. "You say the stitches are holding," Elara translated, "but the essence, the song, is weakening." The bird gave a long, slow tap, confirming her understanding. "Do you know why?" Elara asked, her voice full of gentle urgency. The needlebird tapped a complex pattern, one that Elara hadn't heard often. It spoke of forgetting, of stories untold, of colors losing their names. "Forgetting," Elara mused, tracing a stitch on the wooden button beside her. "The heart patch is forgetting itself?" The bird gave a single, sharp tap. "But how can a patch forget?" Elara asked, more to herself than the bird. The needlebird tapped again, pointing its beak towards the great central patch in the distance. It tapped a pattern that meant, "Listen deeper." "Listen deeper," Elara repeated, taking a deep breath of the crisp mountain air. "Okay, I will." She thanked the needlebird gently and began her descent from the Button Mountains. The journey down was different from the climb up. It was quicker, but still required care and focus. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, though the fluttery anxiety was still there, a little quieter now. From the Button Mountains, the landscape shifted again. She entered a patch that felt like soft, worn corduroy. It was a land of gentle ridges and valleys, the color of old maps. This was the Whispering Plains. The air here was filled with faint, murmuring sounds. Not words you could understand, but the soft whisper of countless voices, all speaking at once, very quietly. These were the echo stories of the planet, memories held in the threads carried on the gentle breeze. Elara realized this was the place the needlebird had meant. This was where she needed to listen deeper. She sat down on a soft corduroy ridge, the material comforting and familiar. She closed her eyes and took several slow, deep breaths. She tried to quiet her own thoughts, to just listen. At first, it was just a confusing sea of soft sounds, like being in a library filled with people all reading aloud very softly. But as she focused, as she let her mind become calm and still, she started to discern patterns, faint melodies, soft laughter, the distant sound of gentle footsteps, the whisper of wind through fabric, the low hum of contented stitches. And beneath it all, she began to hear the stories. Stories of the ancient hands that had first stitched the planet together. Hands that worked with immense care and kindness. Stories of patches being chosen, a patch of sky, a patch of river, a patch of mountain, and being lovingly joined. Stories of the very first pulse of the great central patch, a pulse of pure light and story. She listened for hours, the corduroy soft beneath her, the whispering filling her ears like a gentle lullaby. She learned that the great central patch wasn't just a material, but a reservoir of the planet's collective memory, its history, its very essence. And that essence was fading because the connections were weakening. Not the physical stitches, but the threads of memory, of story, of color and sound that flowed from the heart to the other patches. It was like a giant tapestry where some threads were losing their vibrancy because the central knot was slowly loosening its grip on the narrative. The great central patch wasn't just forgetting its own story, but the stories of all the other patches it was connected to. It was losing its ability to resonate with the gingham, the velvet, the silk, the canvas, the buttons. Elara opened her eyes. The sun was beginning to set, painting the corduroy ridges in long, soft shadows. The whispering around her seemed a little clearer now that she understood what she was hearing. She knew what she had to do. The great central patch needed to be reminded of the colors, the sounds, the textures, the stories of the patches it held together. It needed its connections strengthened, not with new stitches, but with renewed memory and feeling. But how? She couldn't just tell a patch stories. It needed something more tangible in the language of the Patchwork Planet. Colors, sounds, textures. She needed to gather the essence of the other patches and bring it back to the heart. This realization felt heavy, but not overwhelming. It felt like a task perfectly suited to her gentle nature. It required patience. It required listening. It required care. She stood up, her legs a little stiff from sitting for so long, but her mind clearer than it had been. The fluttery anxiety was almost still now, replaced by a quiet determination. Her journey wasn't over. It was just entering a new phase. She needed to travel back, or to other patches she hadn't visited yet, and carefully collect their stories. Not just by listening, but by gathering little pieces of their essence. A single, perfectly colored piece of lint from the gingham meadow. A tiny, discarded piece of velvet leaf. A small vial of shimmering silk water. A glowing bead of light thread. A smooth, small button bug polished button from the mountainside. These wouldn't just be mementos, they would be concentrated stories, carrying the vibrant memory of where they came from. Elara decided to start with the patches she knew. She left the whispering plains, feeling the soft corduroy give way to the firm canvas of the thread spider's home. She saw the spiders still patiently spinning their light threads. She approached the same large spider she had met before. "I understand now," she said softly. "The heart is forgetting. It needs reminding of the other patches." The spider pulsed its light, a pattern of understanding and gentle encouragement. "How will you remind it?" The light pulsed. "By gathering the stories," Alara explained. "The colors, the sounds, the feelings of each patch. Concentrated. Like this bead you gave me." She held up the small glowing bead. The spider seemed to pulse with approval. "Take another." It pulsed and gently spun a smaller, even brighter bead of light thread for her. "Thank you," Alara said, carefully putting it in her bag with the first. She then made her way back to the Button Mountains. She climbed gently to a spot where she had seen a collection of particularly smooth, small buttons. She asked the button bugs for permission naturally. "May I please borrow just one tiny, smooth button?" she asked a bug, polishing a hole. The bug paused, its tiny legs waving. It seemed to consider, then nodded its head and pointed a leg towards a perfectly round gray button, about the size of her thumbnail. It was polished to a high shine by generations of button bugs. Alara gently detached the button from the mountainside, being careful not to disturb the surrounding stitches. "Thank you, little friend," she said to the bug, who gave her a little wave in return. She carefully placed the button in a small, soft pouch in her bag. Descending the mountains, she felt the cool, smooth button warm slightly in her pouch, as if holding on to the memory of the sun on the peaks. Next, the river of silk. Crossing the pearl buttons, she listened to their gentle chime. She knelt carefully at the edge of the river, where the silk flowed slowly. She took out a tiny, empty glass vial she carried. "May I please take just a little of your beautiful flow?" she asked the river softly. The currents seemed to swirl just a little, a ripple of acknowledgement. She gently dipped the vial into a stream of shimmering silver silk, just a tiny amount. The silk felt cool and fluid, yet substantial as it flowed into the vial. She stoppered the vial gently with a small cork. The silver silk swirled and glittered inside the glass, a captured piece of the river's essence. She placed the vial carefully in her bag. Passing back through the velvet forest, the silence enveloped her once more. The air was still cool and smelled of quiet dreams. She walked amongst the velvet trees, her steps muffled. She saw a velvet moth resting on a large indigo leaf. "Hello," she whispered. The moth slowly opened its intricate wings. "I need a little piece of the forest story," Alara explained softly. "A reminder of its peace and quiet for the great patch." The moth seemed to understand. It gently detached a tiny corner of the leaf it was resting on with one delicate leg. The piece fluttered down, soft and silent. Alara caught it gently in her hand. It felt like a piece of night sky, so dark and soft. "Thank you, friend," she said, carefully folding the tiny velvet piece into a clean, soft cloth and placing it in her bag. Finally, she reached the gingham meadow. The cheerful colors and the cheerful buzzing of the bobbin bees felt like coming home. She watched the bees gathering lint, their movements so quick and busy compared to the slow flow of the silk or the quiet spinning of the spiders. She found a patch of flowers with particularly bright, sunny yellow lint. She asked a passing bee, "Excuse me, May I please have just a little pinch of this lovely yellow lint? It is to help the heart patch remember your brightness." The bee paused, hovering in front of her. For the great patch, it buzzed, its tone softening. "Yes," Alara said. The bee immediately collected a tiny, perfect puff of the bright yellow lint and offered it to her. "It hasn't been holding its color as well lately," the bee buzzed sadly. "Maybe this will help us all." "I hope so," Alara said, taking the lint gently. It felt incredibly light and soft, like holding a tiny piece of captured sunshine. She put it in a separate, tiny pouch so it wouldn't get mixed with the other items. Now she had her collection. A bead of light thread from the canvas hills, a polished button from the button mountains, a vial of shimmering silk from the silk river, a piece of velvet leaf from the velvet forest, a puff of bright lint from the gingham meadow, each one a tiny, potent vessel of the patch it came from, carrying its color, its texture, its sound, its feeling, its story. Her bag felt a little heavier, but her heart felt lighter. She turned her steps towards the great central patch. As she got closer, the air grew warmer and there was a faint, underlying pulse, though still weaker than it should be. The colors of the patches surrounding the great patch were noticeably duller here. Greens looked faded, blues were muted, yellows were pale. The very ground beneath her feet, a nondescript, slightly rough material, felt tired. She finally reached the edge of the great central patch. It stretched out before her, enormous and still gently glowing, but the light was weak, the colors muted. It felt like a beloved quilt that had been left out in the sun for too long. Alara stepped onto the great patch. The material felt strange under her boots. Warm, yes, but also a little numb. It felt vast and quiet. She walked slowly towards the very center, the place where the pulse felt strongest, even in its weakened state. She sat down in the middle of the great patch. The surface was soft, like the warm moss, but didn't have a distinct texture of its own. It was just there. She could feel the faint, irregular beat beneath her. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap, pause. It sounded tired. Alara took out her collection of patch stories. She laid them out gently on the surface of the great patch. The glowing bead of light thread pulsed softly. The polished button felt cool. The vial of silk shimmered. The velvet piece was profoundly soft. The puff of lint looked like a tiny sunbeam. Alara closed her eyes again. She placed her hand gently on the surface of the great patch. She focused on its weak, tired pulse, and then she began to speak. She spoke to the great patch as if it were an old friend who was feeling unwell. "Hello, heart," she murmured, her voice soft and kind. "I know you are tired. I know you feel like you are forgetting. But you are not alone. You are connected to everything." She picked up the puff of yellow lint. "Remember the gingham meadow," she said, holding the lint over the patch. "Remember the sun there? The happy buzzing of the bees? The cheerful yellow and blue? You hold the memory of their brightness, their simple joy. Feel their lightness." She gently let the lint rest on the patch. She picked up the piece of velvet. "Remember the velvet forest," she said softly. "Remember the deep quiet, the profound peace, the softness of the leaves? You hold the memory of their calm, their stillness. Feel their soothing silence." She gently placed the velvet piece beside the lint. She picked up the vial of silk. "Remember the river of silk," she whispered. Remember the way the light dances on its surface? The cool, smooth flow, the shimmering colors. You hold the memory of their beauty, their fluidity. Feel their gentle movement. She gently poured the tiny amount of silk from the vial onto the patch. It spread slowly, absorbing into the surface, leaving a faint, shimmering trace. She picked up the polished button. "Remember the button mountains," she said. "Remember the sturdy steps, the different textures, the view from the top? You hold the memory of their strength, their variety. Feel their groundedness." She gently placed the button on the patch. She picked up the glowing bead of light thread. "Remember the canvas hills," she said. "Remember the patient spinning, the light webs, the quiet creation. You hold the memory of their light, their connection. Feel their gentle hum." She gently pressed the bead into the surface of the patch, where it pulsed faintly. Ilara then placed her hands flat on the great patch, surrounding the little collection of memories. "You are all of these," she murmured, "and they are all part of you. You are the anchor for their stories, their colors, their songs. Don't forget how important you are. Don't forget the magic you hold." She sat there, hands on the patch, breathing slowly and deeply. She felt the weak pulse beneath her hands. Tap, tap, pause, tap, tap. She closed her eyes again and began to sing. Not a loud song, but a soft, humming tune. A tune she had heard in the whispering plains. An old melody that spoke of connection and creation. She hummed the tune, feeling the beat of her own heart, steady and strong. She imagined the threads of light, of silk, of color, flowing from the small pieces of memory under her hands into the great patch, flowing outwards from the great patch to all the corners of the planet, connecting everything, bringing the colors back to life, strengthening the hums and whispers. She hummed and hummed, the sound filling the quiet air around the great patch. It felt like she was weaving the song into the fabric of the patch itself. The weak pulse beneath her hands seemed to respond. It grew a tiny bit steadier. Tap, 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 tap. Still not perfect, but stronger. The muted colors around the edges of the great patch seemed to brighten, just a little. The faint, warm glow intensified. Ilara kept humming, kept breathing, kept sending her gentle energy and focus into the patch. She wasn't trying to force it back to life, just reminding it of its own beautiful, vibrant nature, reminding it of the love and care that stitched it into being, reminding it that it was loved and needed. Hours passed. The sun set, and the moon rose, casting a soft silver light over the Patchwork Planet. The great central patch absorbed the collected memories. The silk trace vanished, leaving only a faint shimmer. The lint nestled into the surface. The button felt warm. The velvet piece blended in. The light bead pulsed in rhythm with the patch. Ilara's humming became softer, a barely audible whisper. She felt the pulse beneath her hands. Tap, 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 steady. It was stronger now, more regular. It felt like a heart waking up from a deep, tiring sleep. She felt a wave of peace wash over her. The fluttery moth of anxiety was completely still now. She had helped, not with grand gestures, but with gentle attention, with deep listening, with patient care, and with shared stories. The great central patch wouldn't be exactly as it was before, perhaps. But it was remembering. It was reconnecting. it was finding its rhythm again. The colors around the edge of the patch continued to brighten in the moonlight. The air felt lighter, more vibrant. Alara finally stopped humming. She opened her eyes. The moonlight shone on the great patch, revealing its renewed, soft glow. She gently lifted her hands. "Rest now, heart," she whispered. "Remember." She stood up, her body tired but her spirit filled with a quiet sense of fulfillment. She looked out across the landscape of the Patchwork Planet. The gingham meadow seemed a little brighter, even in the moonlight. The velvet forest looked deeper and more peacefully silent. The silk river sent up shimmering reflections that sparkled like spilled jewels. The thread spider's webs glowed with a steadier light. Everything felt just a little more connected. A gentle breeze stirred the air, carrying with it a faint, happy hum. It was the sound of the stitches singing their contentment. Alara knew the Patchwork Planet was a place of constant change, of threads loosening and tightening, of colors brightening and fading. It would always need care. It would always need someone to listen to the stitches. And she knew, with a deep sense of peace, that she was happy to be that person. Her journey back to her cozy cottage on the edge of the gingham meadow was peaceful. She walked under the soft moonlight, feeling the ground, noticing the textures, listening to the quiet night sounds of the planet. She was home soon. Her little tweed and chenille cottage looked warm and inviting. Inside, the single lamp glowed steadily, a beacon of calm. She put away her needle and listening thread. She took off her felted moss boots. She put on her softest, worn nightgown. She climbed into her small, comfortable bed, piled high with quilts made from countless different patches of the planet. Quilts that felt like a warm, soft hug. The scent of dried lavender was soothing. She lay there, snuggled under the patchwork covers, listening to the quiet hum of her cottage, listening to the gentle night sounds outside, listening to the steady, soft beat of the planet's heart, even from a distance. Tap, 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 tap. Steady. It was the sound of the great central patch, awake and remembering. A sound of peace and connection. A sound to help you feel safe and warm. A sound to help you drift into a soft and peaceful sleep, just like Alara resting after her gentle journey. Feeling the comfort of the stitches, feeling the warmth of the patches, feeling the quiet pulse of the planet. Let that feeling settle over you now, that feeling of being tucked in, safe, soundly. Let your breath become soft and slow, in and out, gentle and easy. Just listening to the quiet sounds, feeling the quiet calm, feeling the softness all around you. The Patchwork Planet is resting now. The great heart is beating steady, and you, my friend, are drifting, floating, slowly, down into a beautiful, restful sleep. Let the stories of the stitches, the colors of the patches, the gentle hum of the world settle over you like a warm, soft quilt. Tuck you in, keep you safe, keep you calm, keep you soundly asleep, drifting, floating, peacefully, to sleep now. Rest. Dream gentle dreams of patchwork skies and velvet trees, of silk rivers and button mountains, of light threads and whispering plains, all stitched together with care and kindness, just like you. Good night, my friend. Sleep gently, sleep soundly, rest well. Now, just drift.